The cast iron skillet was still warm on the stove when my mother handed my brother a lottery ticket and said it was my share of the ranch. It was Thanksgiving. The dishes hadn't been cleared. My Uncle Gary was still at the table with a second piece of pie, and my father's sister Norma was refilling her coffee at the counter. And there were 16 people in that house when my mother reached into the pocket of her holiday apron and produced 2 envelopes. One for my brother Kyle, one for me. Kyle's envelope held a letter. My father read it aloud because he liked to do things that way, liked the room's attention when he was saying something he considered important. The letter confirmed that my parents were signing the deed to the ranch, 160 acres on County Road 214 outside Corsicana, Texas, over to Kyle effective January 1st of the coming year. There was a round of applause. My Uncle Gary whistled through his teeth. My cousin Bethany said, "Oh, that's wonderful." Then my mother handed me the second envelope. I opened it at the table in front of everyone because that was the situation I was in. Inside was a $2 scratch-off lottery ticket. There was no letter. There was no note. There was no explanation. My mother smiled at me with the particular expression she used when she was doing something she had already decided was generous. "We thought you might get lucky," she said. I set the ticket down on the table. "My name is Raylan." I was 33 years old and I had worked for the Navarro County Appraisal District for 9 years as a title examiner. My job was reading deeds. My job was knowing what they said and what they meant and what happened when the person holding the document didn't understand the difference between a wish and a legal instrument. I knew exactly what a deed transfer required. I also knew something about the ranch on County Road 214 that my parents apparently did not. I didn't say anything at the table. I folded the lottery ticket once and put it in my pocket. I picked up my fork and finished my pie. Around me, my family celebrated my brother's future. I drove home 45 minutes later and went directly to my filing cabinet. The bottom drawer. The blue folder I had labeled in block letters 7 years ago. I pulled it out, sat down at my kitchen table and opened it to the first page. The deed was right where I had put it. My name was right where it had always been. I sat with it for a while. I looked at the recording stamp. I looked at the date, October 14, 1999, and at the typeface the Navarro County Courthouse had been using since 1994. Then I made myself a cup of tea and went to bed. To understand what happened at that table, you have to understand what the ranch on County Road 214 actually was, and where it came from before it was ever my parents to discuss. My grandfather on my father's side was named Dwayne Pickett. He was born in 1928 in a farmhouse 12 miles outside of Corsicana, the third of 5 children, none of whom had indoor plumbing until they were teenagers. He finished high school by driving himself 12 miles each way on a dirt road and graduated in 1946, 1 week before he enlisted. He came back from Korea in 1952 with a Purple Heart and a savings account that he had been adding to from his military pay for 2 years because there was nothing to spend it on in a field hospital in Incheon. He bought the first parcel of the ranch in 1954. 40 acres, $3,800 cash from a neighbor who was moving to Houston. He worked the land himself while also working full-time at the cotton compress warehouse in Corsicana, and over the following 18 years he added to the property 4 separate times. By 1972 he owned 160 acres, all of it clear of debt, and he ran a modest cattle operation that never made him rich but never required him to borrow money from anyone either. He used to say that the bank had a long memory but the land had a longer one. He said it the way he said most things, without looking up from whatever he was doing, as though the observation was simply a fact of the world that didn't require ceremony. I was the one who paid attention. From the time I was 6 years old, I went to the ranch with my grandfather on Saturday mornings. Kyle was 2 years older than me and had no interest in the land. He wanted to be in town, wanted to be with his friends, wanted anything that wasn't a pasture fence and a pair of work gloves. That was his right. But it meant that every Saturday morning it was me and Dwayne, and we checked the fence lines and we fed the cattle and he talked and I listened. He told me once, I was 9 years old and we were patching a section of fence on the north corner, that the land knew the difference between someone who was there because they had to be and someone who was there because they wanted to understand it. He said, "Raylan, you got the right kind of patience. The land can tell." He said it the way he said everything else, as a fact, not a compliment. I didn't know at 9 years old what to do with that. But I remembered it. I didn't have money for a 4-year university when I graduated high school in 2007. I applied to Navarro College on a partial academic grant of $2,100 per year and covered the rest with a part-time job at the county clerk's records office, which was, in retrospect, the only job that ever mattered, because it put me in a room full of recorded instruments and taught me, before I had any formal instruction in the subject, what a chain of title looked like and why it mattered. Kyle, the same year, received $9,400 from my parents toward his first semester at a university in Waco that he left after one semester. Nobody asked for the money back. Nobody tracked it. When Dwayne died in 2003, I was 15. He left the 160 acres to my father in a straightforward will, no trust, no addendum, no conditions attached. My father had managed his own affairs well enough by then that the inheritance was uncomplicated. The ranch passed to him cleanly. What nobody knew at the time, what I didn't know until I was 24 and working my third year at the Navarro County Appraisal District, was that my grandfather had filed a separate instrument in 1999 for years before he died. He had gone to a title company in Corsicana alone without telling my father, and had a right of first refusal clause drafted and recorded against the deed. It named me by name. It stated that in any future transfer of the County Road 214 parcel, I had the right to purchase the property at the appraised value before any third party could acquire it, and that this right extended to transfers between family members where the named beneficiary was not the immediate heir. He had recorded it quietly the way he did everything. He filed it at the courthouse, paid the recording fee, and never mentioned it to anyone that I knew of. I found it in 2011, doing a routine title search on an adjacent parcel for a client. I pulled up the full title history on 214 as reference, the way you do when you're checking boundary adjacency, and there it was in the chain. Recorded October 14, 1999, Dwayne Pickett grantor, Raylan Pickett beneficiary. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I called a property attorney named Susan Vela, whose office was on Commerce Street in Corsicana above the insurance agency. I had referred clients to Susan before and knew her to be precise. I told her what I had found. She pulled the recording herself and called me back the next morning. "It's valid," she said. "It's recorded, it's in the chain, and it runs with the land. Your father can't transfer that property to anyone, family member or not, without first offering it to you at appraised value." I told her I understood. "Does your father know about this?" she asked. I told her I didn't know. But based on the fact that he had just spent 9 years treating the ranch as his to dispose of however he chose, I suspected he did not. Susan said, "You may want to decide what you want to do with that before he does something that requires us to unwind it." I told her I would think about it. That was in 2011. I spent the next 2 years thinking about it. Not because I was uncertain. I knew what I wanted and I knew what Dwayne had intended. But because I understood that using that instrument would change things with my family in a way that could not be unchanged. I was not in a hurry to cause that disruption if it wasn't necessary. In 2013 I exercised the right. I notified my father in writing through Susan Vela's office that I was invoking the right of first refusal on the County Road 214 parcel. My father called me the same afternoon. "What is this?" he said. His voice had the particular quality it got when he was surprised by something he thought he should have known about. "What does this mean?" I told him it meant I wanted to purchase the property and that the instrument gave me the right to do so at appraised value. "Your grandfather never said anything to me about this," he said. "He filed it in 1999, I said. "It's been in the chain of title for 14 years. There was a long pause on the line. I didn't fill it. "I'm not selling the ranch," he said finally. "I know," I said. "The right is triggered by a transfer, not by a sale to an outside party. But if you ever do transfer it, to anyone, I have the right to purchase it first." He said, "That's not how family works." I told him I understood he felt that way. Kept my voice even. I let that sit between us for a moment. "We'll talk about this at Christmas," he said. I said that sounded fine. We didn't talk about it at Christmas. Or the Christmas after that. Or the 5 Christmases after that, because as long as my father retained the property, there was nothing to talk about. The appraised value in 2013 was $247,000. By 2022, the year of the Thanksgiving announcement, the Navarro County Appraisal District had assessed the 160 acres at $290,000. I knew that figure without looking it up. I had processed the appraisal roll myself. I had $89,000 saved. I had spoken to First Texas Financial about a bridge loan on the remaining balance. I had done this quietly over the preceding 6 months, because I had noticed a shift in my father's conversations with Kyle. The particular way my father asked about Kyle's plans, about Kyle's situation, about what Kyle might do if he had more stability. I had learned to read weather in my family. I had been reading it for 20 years. What my family did not know was that I had also been making quiet payments on my parents' property tax bill for the ranch since 2016. The Navarro County tax rolls showed a balance due each October, and each October for 6 years I had paid $1,840 directly to the county, not because my parents asked, but because I had checked the rolls as a matter of habit and seen the balance sitting there unpaid past the discount window. I paid it and said nothing. My parents believed the county had a payment plan arrangement. They did not. The arrangement was me paying from my own account 6 years running. Total, $11,040. Not one of them ever asked how the taxes kept getting resolved. The blue folder in my filing cabinet held the original right of first refusal instrument, certified copy, with the recording stamp from October 1999. It held Susan Vela's written opinion from 2011. It held the current appraisal summary. And it held a letter from First Texas Financial confirming my pre-qualification. I had kept every piece of paper. I had labeled each one. That was my job and I was good at it. What my parents had given Kyle at that Thanksgiving table was not theirs to give. The instrument recorded by my grandfather in 1999 meant that before the deed moved anywhere, it had to come to me first. They had handed my brother 160 acres. They had handed me a $2 scratch-off ticket. One of those things was going to matter. The other one wasn't. After Thanksgiving, I drove back to Corsicana the long way, through the county roads, past the feed store on Highway 31, past the turn for County Road 214. I took the turn that time. I drove out to the gate and sat with the engine running and looked at the fence line in the dark for a while. Then I turned around and went home. The transfer notice arrived certified mail on December 4th. The return address was a title company in Corsicana I didn't recognize. A new outfit recently opened on the south side of town. The notice informed me, as the holder of the recorded right of first refusal instrument, that a deed transfer of the County Road 214 parcel was being initiated to Kyle Pickett, and that my statutory response window was 30 days from the date of receipt. The window closed January 3rd. I set the notice on my kitchen table. I read it twice. Then I called Susan Vela. "They sent the notice," I said. "I see it," she said. She had already pulled her copy. The title company found the instrument in the chain and flagged it. "They had to notify you." A brief pause. "This is the moment, Raylan. If you're going to exercise, we need to file the formal response within the window. Do you want to proceed?" I looked at the notice on my table. I thought about Dwayne walking into that Corsicana title company in 1999. Alone without telling anyone, and paying the recording fee and signing his name and walking back out. He had made a decision about who would still be there when the land needed someone. He had recorded it properly. He had left it in the chain for 23 years. "Yes," I said. "File it." Susan filed the formal assertion of right the following week. She sent my father's attorney a copy by certified mail. My father did not call. The Christmas dinner invitation arrived in my mailbox the same week. A printed card, my mother's handwriting, the annual event at their house on Willow Creek Road, December 21st. I set it on the counter next to the transfer notice and looked at both of them for a moment. I RSVP'd yes. I knew what was going to happen. I needed to be in the room when it did. If you've ever been the one in your family who kept the paperwork when everyone else assumed there was nothing to keep, who paid attention to the quiet details, the recorded instruments, the things people filed without ceremony, you already know what I felt standing in my kitchen that December holding those 2 pieces of mail. The feeling isn't triumph. It's something quieter. Something closer to a long exhale. The night before the dinner, I called Susan Vela at 7 in the evening. I was at my kitchen table with the blue folder open in front of me. "I'm going tomorrow," I said. "They're going to make the announcement at dinner. I'm going to respond then." Susan said, "The documents are in order. The assertion of right is filed. The title company has our correspondence. You're not doing anything procedurally unusual. You're responding to a transfer announcement that affects a recorded instrument with your name on it." She paused. "You have the right to be in that room, Raylan. You have had it for 23 years. I told her I knew. Call me Friday, she said. Whatever happens, call me. I told her I would. I closed the folder. I set it on the table where I could reach it in the morning. If you've ever been the one who did the invisible work, the Saturday mornings, the paperwork, the quiet payments nobody knew about, and watched someone else get handed the thing you built the foundation for, I want you to know that the foundation is real. The work is in the record. What gets recorded doesn't disappear just because nobody mentions it at the table. I went to bed. I didn't sleep well. That was fine. I didn't need to sleep well. I needed to be there. If you've ever sat up the night before the moment that's been coming for years, running the documents in your mind, making sure every piece was in the right order, making sure you had thought of everything, you know that what you feel isn't nerves, exactly. It's a kind of readiness. The kind that only comes when you have actually done the work. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window while it was still dark, watching the yard come gray with the early light. The pecan tree at the back fence had dropped the last of its leaves 2 weeks before, and the branches were bare and clear against the sky. I stood there until my cup was empty. I dressed the way I dressed for title hearings, the navy blazer I wore when I needed to be taken seriously in a room that had not yet decided to take me seriously. Not a holiday outfit. Not what I would normally wear to a family Christmas dinner. The blazer was what I put on when I was at work, and that was what I was going to be. I buttoned it in front of the bathroom mirror and did not second-guess the choice. The blue folder was on the kitchen table where I had left it the night before. I opened it once and checked the order. Right of first refusal instrument on top, recording stamp visible, my name clear on the beneficiary line. Behind it, Susan Vela's written legal opinion from 2011. Behind that, the current appraisal summary, $290,000, Navarro County Appraisal District, my own department's stamp on the cover sheet. Behind that, the pre-qualification letter from First Texas Financial. I refolded it. I slid the folder into my bag. I checked the bag once. Then I checked it again. Then I zipped it and left it by the door and went to rinse my cup. I drove the 31 minutes to my parents' house on Willow Creek Road. The radio came on with the engine and I turned it off before I reached the end of my street. The roads were dry and cold, 28 degrees and clear, the kind of December morning in Corsicana where the sky is so blue it looks like something painted. I passed the Navarro County Courthouse without looking at it, which took a specific effort because I had spent 9 years walking in and out of that building and it had a gravity I usually gave into. I passed the feed store on Highway 31 where Dwayne had bought his fence supplies for 40 years. I passed the turn for County Road 214 without taking it. I turned onto Willow Creek Road at 9:08. The driveway was already full. I counted 7 vehicles. My Uncle Gary's pickup, Norma's sedan from Abilene, Kyle's truck with the boat hitch he never used, the Tillman cousins' minivan, my mother's sister's car from Waco, and 2 I didn't immediately place. Someone had strung lights along the porch railing. The front door was open behind the storm door, and the smell of my mother's cornbread dressing reached me from the driveway. I sat in my car for 90 seconds. Not because I was uncertain. Because I wanted the stillness while I still had it. Then I picked up my bag and went inside. The house was warm and crowded in the particular way it got every December 21st. Voices layered over each other. The television on in the back room with a bowl game nobody was watching. My mother's good china on the dining table with the red and green runner she had used since before I was born. 22 people were expected and most of them were already there. My cousin Bethany was pouring sweet tea in the kitchen. My Uncle Gary was telling a story to whoever would hold still long enough to hear it. My father was at the head of the dining room table, standing, talking to my mother's brother with the particular posture he used when he was presiding over something. Shoulders squared, hands loose at his sides, head slightly elevated. He was in his good shirt. He caught my eye when I came in and nodded once. He did not smile. Kyle was in the hallway talking to his wife. He saw me come in and something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something more like calculation. He nodded. I nodded back. My mother came out of the kitchen and hugged me and said she was glad I came. I told her the dressing smelled wonderful. I went to help in the kitchen for 20 minutes because that was what I always did and I was not going to stop doing it today. When everyone settled at the table, I took my usual seat. 4th from my father's left, across from Norma, 2 chairs down from Kyle. My bag was on the floor beside my chair. I kept one hand near it. My father looked around the table with the expression of a man who had arranged something and was waiting for the room to receive it. I had sat across from that expression at enough depositions to know exactly what kind of announcement was coming. Kept my face still. I unfolded my napkin and placed it in my lap. I understood what was being staged. I was willing to let it run. My father picked up his water glass and tapped it once with his knife. The room quieted in stages. The back table conversations first, then the cousins, then the last pockets near the kitchen doorway. 22 people settled. The bowl game in the back room was still on, muted now, its light pulsing faintly through the hallway. Before we say grace, my father said, I want to take a minute to share some good news with this family. He looked around the table. He had the voice he used for announcements. Unhurried, placed, the voice of a man who was accustomed to being listened to and had never had to ask for it twice. Your mother and I have been doing some thinking this year about the future. About what Dwayne built and what it means to keep it in the family the right way. He paused. He looked at Kyle. Kyle has got a family of his own now. He's ready to take on something real, something that lasts. And your mother and I have decided that the ranch on County Road 214, the 160 acres Dwayne spent his whole life building, is going to Kyle. He picked up his glass. We're making it official in January. We want everybody here to celebrate that with us. He raised his glass. Around the table glasses went up. My Uncle Gary said, That's right. Bethany said something warm. Kyle nodded with the expression of someone who was trying to look humble and not quite managing it. My mother was smiling the way she smiled at things she had already decided were settled. At the other end of the table, Norma did not raise her glass. She kept her hands flat on the tablecloth and looked at me. I waited. I let every glass come down. I let the small sounds of agreement finish. The murmurs, the nods, the scrape of chairs as people settled back. I let my father set his glass on the table and feel the room absorbing what he'd said as though it were already done. Then I set my napkin on the table. I pushed my chair back. I stood up. The table went quiet again, differently this time. 22 people looked at me. I kept my hands at my sides. I kept my shoulders level. I looked at my father. Dad, I said. I need to say something before we go further. He looked at me with the expression he used when he was deciding how much patience to extend. Raylan. You said it's what makes sense for the family, I said. My voice was even. Flat. The way I kept it when I was reading a disputed title chain in a room full of people who had all decided what it said before I opened my mouth. You were right that it needs to make sense. But there's an instrument in the title chain on County Road 214 that changes what's possible here. My father set down his glass. This isn't the place for this. You made the announcement here, I said. In front of everyone. So this is the place. Someone at the far end of the table shifted in their chair. My Uncle Gary had stopped talking. I reached into my bag. I lifted out the blue folder. I set it on the table in front of me. I opened it slowly, one clasp, then the cover, then the first page. The right of first refusal instrument, recording stamp facing up, dated October 14, 1999. I unfolded it fully, one page and then the second, until it lay open and flat on the tablecloth. I slid it toward the center of the table where my father could read it. The paper made a small sound as it settled against the tablecloth. The recording stamp was dark and clear. My name was on the beneficiary line in the typeface the Navarro County Courthouse had been using since 1994, and I knew that typeface the way I knew my own handwriting. This is a right of first refusal instrument, I said. Filed by Dwayne Pickett on October 14, 1999. It names me as beneficiary. It means that before the County Road 214 parcel can be transferred to anyone, family member or otherwise, it has to be offered to me first at appraised value. I reached in again and took out Susan Vela's legal opinion and laid it flat beside the instrument. This is my attorney's written opinion confirming the instrument is valid and recorded in the chain of title. I reached in a third time and took out the first Texas financial prequalification letter. And this confirms I have financing in place. I laid it flat beside the other two. I'm prepared to complete the purchase. The table was silent. My father was looking at the documents. His face had gone the particular gray of someone who has just understood that the ground they were standing on was a different ground than they thought. His jaw tightened. His right hand moved toward the instrument and then stopped. That thing was filed 23 years ago, he said. His voice was lower now. Controlled but with effort. He never said anything to me about this. He filed it at the courthouse, I said. It's been in the chain of title since 1999. This is not. He stopped. He picked up the instrument and then set it back down. His hand when he set it down was not entirely steady. You're going to do this. Here. At Christmas dinner. You announced the transfer here, I said. At Thanksgiving. In front of the family. I didn't choose the venue. Kyle said, Raylan. His voice was careful. Can we talk about this another time? This doesn't have to happen right now. The transfer notice was sent December 4th, certified mail, I said. The 30-day response window closes January 3rd. If I don't assert the right formally by then, I lose it permanently. So yes. It does have to happen. I looked at my father. It's been in the chain for 23 years, Dad. Since before I started working at the appraisal district. Since before you retired. Dwayne put it there in 1999 and he never told you, and I found it in 2011 during a routine title search, and I have been waiting since then to see whether you would ever transfer that property, because I didn't want to cause this if I didn't have to. My father's mouth moved. He did not speak. You handed Kyle 160 acres, I said. You handed me a $2 lottery ticket. You said it was what made sense for the family. I let that sit for a moment. Dwayne made a different decision in 1999. He made it legally, recorded it properly, and signed his name to it. I'm honoring what my grandfather decided about his own land. The color had gone out of my father's face. His hands were flat on the table now. Both of them pressed flat the way a person presses their hands down when they need something to hold still. His eyes were wet, not from crying, but from the blood pressure shift of a man who had not been wrong about something this fundamental in a very long time and did not know where to put it. His shoulders had dropped. My mother beside him had gone very still. She was looking at the documents on the table. He did not look at me. Kyle looked at his wife. Then he looked at the instrument. His wife looked at her lap. At the far end of the table, Norma had her hands folded in front of her. He was watching my father. Her face was the face of someone who has known a thing for a long time and has waited without complaint for the room to catch up. My Uncle Gary set his glass down carefully. Nobody else moved. The purchase will go through Susan Vela's office, I said. The title company in Waxahachie already has the documents. This is not a surprise to them. It should be completed by February. I picked up the 3 documents. I stacked them in order. I slid them back into the blue folder and put the folder in my bag. I sat down. The table held its silence for a long moment. Then my mother stood up and went to the kitchen because that was what she did, and the sound of her moving around in the next room was the signal the room needed to start breathing again. My father did not move for a long time. He sat at the head of the table with his hands still flat on the tablecloth and looked at the space where the documents had been. Kyle said something quietly to his wife. Gary looked at his plate. Norma, across the table from me, reached over and picked up the bread basket. She passed it to the person beside her without saying anything. She looked at me once. That was all she needed to do. We said grace. We ate. My father sat at the head of the table through the meal and ate half his plate and did not speak much. Nobody asked him to. The cousins found other things to talk about. The bowl game came back on in the back room. After dinner, I helped clear the table. I washed the serving dishes at the sink with my cousin Bethany, who did not mention what had happened and handed me dishes to dry the same as she always had. The kitchen radio was on low. The water was warm. Before I left, Kyle found me in the hallway putting on my coat. I didn't know, he said. About the instrument. I want you to know that. I believed him. I told him so. Are you going to, what happens to the cattle operation? He said. I'll figure that out, I said. It's my land to figure out. He nodded. He had the look of a person recalibrating, working through something he hadn't expected to have to work through. He was not a bad person. He had simply been handed something that wasn't available to be handed and nobody had told him. I picked up my bag and walked out into the December cold. The purchase closed on February 8th. Susan Vela called me at my desk at the appraisal district when the title company confirmed the recording. She said, "It's done." I said, "Thank you." I hung up and went back to the title search I had been working on before she called. My father did not contact me in January. He did not contact me in February. In March he called once and left a voicemail that said he hoped I was doing well and that maybe we could have lunch sometime. I listened to it twice. I did not call back that day. I called back 2 weeks later and we talked for 11 minutes about nothing consequential, the way two people talk when they are both deciding quietly how much of the distance between them is permanent. You said it was what made sense for the family. I thought about that phrase every October for 6 years while I paid the property tax bill on a ranch I didn't legally own yet, out of an account nobody in my family knew existed. You said Kyle was ready to take on something real, something that lasts. I thought about Dwayne filing that instrument alone in 1999 at the courthouse without telling anyone, deciding quietly who was the person who would still be there when the land needed someone. You handed me a $2 lottery ticket. You were right about one thing, I did get lucky. I got lucky that my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he walked into that title company 23 years before Thanksgiving and put my name on a document that nobody remembered until the moment it mattered. The 160 acres on County Road 214 are mine. I drove out on the first Saturday in March and I walked the fence line the same way Dwayne had walked it with me when I was 6 years old. The corner post on the north edge was still there. The land was starting to green up from the winter. I stood at the post for a while with my hand on it and then I walked back to my truck and drove home and made dinner. If you've ever been the one in your family who paid attention when nobody else did, who showed up on the Saturday mornings and stayed when the work wasn't glamorous and kept the paperwork in a blue folder just in case, this is your sign. Showing up is not invisible. Sometimes it just takes 23 years to be seen. The people who hand you a $2 lottery ticket and call it fair are telling you everything you need to know about how they see you. What you do with that information is the only thing that matters. If you've ever been counted out before the count was finished, let this be your sign that the quiet ones always know more than the loud ones think. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs it.